You're on.
Well, I want to welcome everybody to this continuing study. We're talking about new things, or all things new. These are some, for me, new insights into the Word of God and its description of the unseen realm. Like so many truths that I've discovered over the years, these truths are found elucidated most clearly in the Old Testament. And of course, because the Old Testament scriptures are set in an ancient Mesopotamian environment, that's such a different culture and time and place. It's more difficult than the Greco-Roman culture in which the New Testament scriptures are made and have come down to us. And so, so far, we've tried to make the point the Old Testament shows God operating and working in conjunction with a divine council of spiritual beings, of which there are no equals. There's only one Lord of Lords and King of Kings. There's only one Creator God, but He has chosen to have a spiritual family, not only on earth, but in heaven. And the spiritual family is called the sons of God. Also, there are cherubim and seraphim. These are guardians of the divine realm. And then, of course, the angels. But where before I had a tendency to see angels and sons of God as the same spiritual beings, I think the Old Testament makes a distinction between the two. So with that in mind, that was our first lesson. Then we went to the creation account where God speaks in the plural. Let us make man in our image and our likeness. So who was He speaking to? Well, the divine council. So we are made in the likeness and image of not only God, but also of the divine beings that are part of that council of God. And then we discovered that the serpent in chapter 3 was a anointed guardian cherubim. We discovered that by reading Ezekiel chapter 28, where he was comparing the king of Tyre to the prideful serpent that rebelled. And he tells us more details that many in the ancient world who would read the garden story would know. And that is, the garden was a place where God walked, where God communed with Adam and Eve. And so in the ancient world, this would have to be on a mountaintop. And Ezekiel 28 says it's on the mountain of the Lord, is where Eden is. And that having a garden and plenty of water, this was all associated with the ancient Mesopotamian world, with where the gods met, where their council met, and where their decisions were made. And so the Old Testament agrees with that general view of a divine council. And we discovered, of course, unique nature of the serpent. And if you look at some of the archaeology that's dug up some of the ancient temples in ancient Mesopotamia, they'll have these carvings of these part animal, part human likeness beings, and some in the form of lions, some in the form of serpents, that are their renderings of what the guardian cherubims would be, who would guard sacred places and guard the temple of the time, or to guard the place where the king met. Matter of fact, if you remember, that when you go to the Holy of Holies, what's in there on each side of the ark are cherubim, carved cherubim that symbolize these winged spiritual guardians of the footstool of God in the Holy of Holies. So these were very familiar figures to people in the ancient world, these have been kind of forgotten ideas to us. Then what we went on to was to realize that in the first rebellion, it was really a spiritual being. The serpent was supposed to be there as a guardian of God's land, but instead he betrayed his responsibility. Obviously, he had free will to do what he wanted to, but obviously he had some sort of contempt for human beings and what God's plans were for human beings, and he tried to undermine that very quickly and was successful. Of course, we as human beings had to cooperate with that temptation. But then that's just the first rebellion. But over in Genesis chapter 6, leading up to the flood, we read about the second major rebellion, both in heaven and on earth. And this is where the sons of God, part of the heavenly council, some of them, saw that the women on earth were beautiful, and they decided, well, let's go down and marry some of them, and that way we'll interact with the earthly beings. And they produced children called Nephilim, which is a word hard to translate, maybe fallen ones. But when the Greek translation of the Old Testament was made shortly before the time of Jesus, the Septuagint, the word used for them was giants. So, part of them, they were part divine being, part human being, and evidently were quite large. And we find that that only other time that this term is used in the Bible is when the children of Israel come back with a report and discover there's some Nephilim survivors in the promised land who are these giants that they feel like are too powerful and great for them to be able to conquer. So, so we have this sons of God rebelling, coming down and engaging with inappropriate behavior with women, and then fostering children that led to a great violence on the earth and led God to regret he'd made man and to decide to cleanse the earth with a flood and to, of course, save only and preserve one family, Noah's family. As we said last week, there are a number of other terms that are used for these people that the Mesopotamian culture referred to these events and these people as wise sages that came down and taught all this special wisdom. And we said last week, today you find people going back and looking at all kinds of ancient cultures who claim that gods were coming down to them and sometimes having children, etc. And of course, they think these are space aliens. Well, if you think the sons of God are space aliens, then yes, there were. However, that one small passage in Genesis 6 doesn't tell us too much about the story. There obviously was a lot more to the story than 3 or 4 verses could contain. But the story was well known, not only in Israel, but in the other parts of the ancient Mesopotamian world. And so what we noted was that the New Testament alludes to this event in Peter and in Jude about the rebellion of the sinful angels and of the consequences. And I'd like to reread the Jude part of that as we introduce our class tonight, as we're going to go more into the book of Enoch. And Jude, we'll start with verses 6 and 7. And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, the heavenly realm, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Now, there's no mention of that anywhere directly in the Old Testament. So how does the writer in Jude know this? Well, a little later, he gives us a further clue. If we turn a little later in Jude, verse 14 and 15, it was also about these that Enoch The seventh from Adam prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all and to convict all the ungodly of all their deeds and their ungodliness that they have committed in such an ungodly way, and for all the harsh things that ungodly sinners have spoken against him. And as we noted last week, that's a quote of one verse in the first chapter of the book of First Enoch. So it's very clear that the writer of Peter, First and Second Peter, and we'll find also some of the things that Jesus did stem back to responding to what we find told us in the book of First Enoch. Now, we want to make a clear distinction. The Jews never considered First Enoch to be an inspired book. An occasional Christian group of the early years, etc., may have considered it a special book, but it's really not accepted by Christians either as an inspired work of God. That's why it's not in the Bible. But doesn't mean that it doesn't contain, in general, accurate information. Maybe every detail isn't accurate, but the gist of the story must be, or else we wouldn't find Jude directly quoting it, or the clear allusions both in 2 Peter and Jude and other places to what is discussed in the book of First Enoch. And so with that in mind, let's just remind you, of course, Enoch, we're talking about the biblical character before the flood in chapter 5 of the Genesis, starting with verse 21. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God, and he walked with God. Oh, I lost something. Enoch walked with God, and he fathered Methuselah 300 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Now, that's a fairly generic statement, but it appears that he didn't die a normal death, but was translated into the heavenly realm by God. And the book of First Enoch assumes, the book does, that God took him on some heavenly tours, showed him some wisdom that he would have passed on to Noah and his family, and thus would have been passed on through the generations down until the writer of First Enoch, which was probably written a couple hundred years before the New Testament. A Jewish writer put this down in a book that we call First Enoch. Now, one other thing I think would be important for us to know, and that is the prophet Daniel. In the prophet Daniel, chapter 4, there's a couple of allusions to the watchers. And that's going to be important for us because this is the term that Enoch uses, the book of Enoch does, to describe the sons of God that have rebelled and have come down to earth. And in the book of Daniel, chapter 4, which is one of the parts of Daniel, not all of it, but part of Daniel is written in Aramaic. And so that's why there's a different name that's used here. They're called watchers, which is a Aramaic word. In chapter 4, King Nebuchadnezzar has this vision dream in which he sees this huge cosmic tree that goes down the depths of the earth and up into the sky and can be seen from everywhere. He wants this dream to be interpreted. But here's what he said in verse 13 of chapter 4 of Daniel. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. So it identifies these watchers as holy ones. He proclaimed aloud and said this, chop down the tree, lop off its branches, strip off its leaves, scatter its fruit. This is that cosmic tree he saw. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches, but leave the stump of its root in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beast and the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's. Let a beast's mind be given to him. Let 7 periods of time pass over him. The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliness of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw, and you, O Belshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. And of course, he interprets this to say the tree is the great Babylonian kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar, but he's been prideful, and that he's going to be punished by a period of insanity that's going to follow. But that's a whole other story, but I just wanted to read that to show you where the Old Testament uses the term watchers. And in this particular occasion, it doesn't seem to necessarily be the rebellious watchers, because these watchers are delivering divine information. They're part of the holy ones, the Kodeshim, the holy council, the divine council. So these may be some of the righteous sons of God that have not rebelled against the will of God. So again, just some of the sons of God went down to women, and we're going to read later, there's other sons of God that were involved in a later third rebellion, but that's the topic of our next class. But with that done, I'd like to give you a brief overview of the book of Enoch. As I said before, you can go online, put translation of First Enoch and find that. Hopefully some of you have been able to do that and just read from that. I've just summarized the overview of the entire book, because we're only going to deal with a very short part of it that deals most relevantly with Genesis 6. But the first 16 chapters explains this fundamental source of evil in the world came from the rebellion of the watchers, or the sons of God, and that resulted in the flood that was to follow. That's the first 16 chapters. Chapters 17 through 36, Enoch is given a tour of the heavenly realm, in which he is introduced to the divine council and to the throne room of God in the heavenlies. And then in chapters 37 through 71, offers practical words of wisdom about holy living while on earth, and assures those whom he's writing to there will be punishment for the wicked that rebel against this wisdom, as well as that the righteous will be vindicated in the final analysis. And then in chapter 72 through 82 contain wisdom of that time of astrology and cosmology. So this would be seen as the latest of insight, science, so to speak, of their day. Chapters 83 through 90 is a review of the history from that time down to the time of Enoch, told as an allegory in which animals represent different kingdoms and peoples, etc. And including some circumstances that surrounded Noah's birth, some details we don't have in the Bible. So that's in a gist the overall book, but I want us to concentrate on those parts that speak most powerfully to what we're talking about in Genesis 6. I'd like to start out by just reading the first chapter of First Enoch. The words of the blessing of Enoch. wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation when all the wicked and the godless are to be removed. He took up this parable and said, Enoch, a righteous man, whose eyes were opened by God, saw the vision of the Holy One in the heavens, which the angel showed me. And from them I heard everything, and from them I understand as I saw, but not for this generation, but for a remote one, which is for to come. Concerning the elect, I said, and took up my parable concerning them. So he's saying that this wisdom that he got about what's going to happen is not just for his time, but is for a more remote time. And the writer of Enoch would say it would be the times he was living in and the times that were shortly to come. And, shortly after that, Jesus came. Shortly after that, the Romans came and destroyed Judea as a nation. So these are the catastrophic events on the way. The Holy Great One will come forth from his dwelling, and the eternal God will tread upon the earth as on Mount Sinai, and appear in the strength of his might from the heaven of heavens. And all shall be smitten with fear, and the watchers shall quake, and great fear and trembling shall seize them into the ends of the earth. And the high mountains shall be shaken, and the high hills shall be made low, and shall melt like wax before the flame. And the earth shall be wholly rent in sunder, and all that is upon the earth shall perish. And there shall be a judgment upon all men. But with the righteous he will make peace, and he will protect the elect, and mercy shall be upon them, and they shall all belong to God, and they shall be prospered. And they shall all be blessed, and he will help them all, and light shall appear unto them, and he will make peace with them. Now here's the verse, last verse of chapter 1, that's quoted in Jude. And behold, he cometh with 10,000 of his holy ones. This would be all the unseen realm, the sons of God, the angels, etc., to execute judgment upon all, to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness which they have ungodly committed, and of the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. So basically this is saying there's going to be a final judgment day in which all the accounts are going to be set straight. And God, just as surely as he's going to punish the wicked, he will protect and take care of those that are the elect, the select people of God that have put their trust in him. So that's just a kind of an introduction. And for several chapters, it goes on like that. I'd like to pick up where it starts talking about Genesis chapter 6, which is in the 6th chapter of 1st Enoch. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Simjizah, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of this great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecation. Imprecation meaning that curses will fall upon us if we do not fulfill this. Not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. They swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecation upon it. And they were all 200 who descended in the days of Jared, that's the father of Enoch, on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecation upon it. Hermon may mean we swore an oath. And these are the names of their leaders. So Sam-Uzzah, their leader, Arakabah, Ramael, Kokabel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Daniel, Ezekiel, Barakuthiel, Aziel, Armaros, Bat-Arel, Anel, Zachiel, Samsabel, Satriel, Turiel, Jomzael, Sariel. These are their chiefs of 10. So remember when Moses was ready to, in the wilderness, his father-in-law advised him to put men over 10, men over 100, men over 1,000 to govern and to judge. And so here he says there were 200, and so they had 20 leaders, and these were the names of those leaders. So the important thing I want you to remember in this is it says they descended on Mount Hermon. Now, Mount Hermon is located at the very northern part of the land of Israel. Today it is. It's right on the northern boundary. They actually control it. Israel does today. But in the times of the Old Testament, they didn't really control that area. That was the beginning of Lebanon or Syria. But it's the highest mountain anywhere near there. It's higher than the mountains leading up to Jericho. It's higher than Mount Sinai or any other of the high mountains in the desert. And so remember, one of the things we learned about ancient people is that they expected divine beings to come and assemble and to then come down to the earth through high places, through mountain places. And you go throughout the Old Testament, there are a lot of allusions to that. But Mount Hermon will be an important thing to remember because it's in right where the city of Dan and the tribe of Dan were at the far north. It's where pagan idols were put up during the kingdom when Israel divided from Judah. Israel was in 10 northern tribes. They put a worship site in Dan. And in the time of Jesus, this is where Caesarea Philippi was, right at the foot of Mount Hermon. And some important things happen there that I think relate to what we're going to discover in the book of First Enoch. So just keep in mind, Mount Hermon is where they descended. And so, you know, people have oftentimes wondered, well, why did the Egyptians build these high pyramids? Well, there are no mountains nearby. And they believed you had to have mountains, high places, to both meet the gods and for the gods to come down to you. And so the same thing happened in chapter 11 of Genesis when they're in the plains of Shinar, the plains of where Iraq is, very low level, just small hills. Well, they built, you know, their own high places there that, of course, God came down and condemned. So this is an important detail to keep in mind. Well, let's go on to the next one. Chapter 7. And all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go into them and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bore great giants whose height was 3,000 elis. So think of you know, Goliath. This is about twice the size of whatever the size of Goliath was. We consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish and devour one another's flesh and drink their blood. Then the earth laid accusations against the lawless ones. So in the New Testament, it talks about the lawless one. It's I think, an allusion to these rebellious angels and the people they created that created violence and havoc on the earth. And so here in Enoch, he defines these as giant-sized human beings. And you can imagine in a warlike environment in the ancient world how powerful they would be to be twice to 3 times the size of average human beings. And so let's continue on. Next chapter, chapter 8. And as Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones and all colored tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Simjizah taught enchantments and root cutting. Armoros, the resolving of enchantments. Barakel taught astrology. Kokabel, the constellations. Ezekiel, the knowledge of the clouds. Eriquel, the signs of the earth. Shemzel, the signs of the sun. Seriel, the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up into heaven. So basically what this is telling us is that all the wisdom that the ancient world talked about, from their astrology to their, of course, weapons of war, ability to develop the metals of the earth and to use them in a warlike way to defend themselves with breastplates and shields, as well as to construct swords, the warfare of the ancient world. All of these things were revealed to them by these rebellious gods. And no doubt it was to enhance their influence over the people and for their sons that came from them to be able to dominate other peoples on the earth. But the result of it all was this great upcry going up into the heavens of the average human beings that were suffering before the flood under this terrible, corrupt situation. Then chapter 8. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, we've heard of some of those names in the New Testament. These are considered to be the 4 archangels of heaven, looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, all the lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. And they said to one another, the earth made without inhabitants cries the voice of their crying up to the gates of heaven. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men, make their suits, saying, bring our cause before the Most High. And they said to the Lord of the ages, Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and God of the ages, the throne of thy glory standeth unto all the generations of the ages. And they name holy and glorious unto all the ages. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou. All things are naked and open in thy sight. Now thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel hath done. who hath taught all the unrighteous on the earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And Simjas, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates, and they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has therefore been filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now, behold, the souls of those who have died are crying, making their suit to the gates of heaven. And their lamentation have ascended and cannot cease before the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. And thou knowest all things before they come to pass, and thou seest these things, thou dost suffer them, and thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these. So at some point, the archangels, hearing the cries of the suffering human dead and dying, approach God's holy throne and put their petitions before God, saying, I know you know these things, but you haven't told us if there's something we should do about this great evil on the earth. And then we turn to chapter 10. Then said the Most High, the Holy and Great, spoke, and sent Uriel to the son of Lamech, and said to him, Go to Noah, and tell him in my name, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and a deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is in it. And now instruct him that he may escape, and his seed may be preserved for all generations of the world. And again the Lord said to Raphael, Bind Azazel hand and foot, cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. And heal the earth which the angels have corrupted, and proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague, and that all the children of men may not perish through all the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. And to Gabriel, the Lord said, Proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of the fornication, and destroy these children, the children of the watchers, from amongst men, and cause them to go forth, and them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. For length of days shall they not have, and no request that they make of thee shall be granted unto their fathers on their behalf. For they hope to live an eternal life, and that each of them will live 500 years. And the Lord said unto Michael, Go bind Shemzazah and his associates, who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled them with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation, till the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. In those days they shall be led off to the abyss of fire, to the torment and the prison in which they shall be confined forever. And whosoever shall be condemned and destroyed will from thenceforth be bound together with them to the end of all generations. And destroy all the spirits and the reprobates, the children of the watchers, because they have wronged mankind. Destroy all wrong from the face of the earth, and let every evil work come to an end, and let the plant of righteousness and truth appear, and it shall prove a blessing. The works of righteousness and truth shall be planted in truth and joy forevermore. And then shall all righteousness escape, and shall live till they beget thousands of children. All the days of their youth and their old age shall they complete in peace. And then shall the whole earth be filled in righteousness, and shall all be planted with trees, and be full of blessing. And all desirable trees shall be planted on it. They shall plant vines on it. The vines which they plant thereon shall yield wine in abundance. And as for all the seed which is sown thereon, each measure of it shall bear 1,000, and each measure of olive shall yield 10 presses of oil. And cleanse thou the earth from all oppression, from all unrighteousness, and from all sin, from all godlessness, from all uncleanness that is wrought upon the earth, destroy from off the earth. And all the children of men shall become righteous, and all the nations shall offer adoration, and shall praise me, and all shall worship me, and the earth shall be cleansed from all defilement, from all sin, from all punishment, and from all torment. I will never again send upon it for generation to generation and forever. So this is the prelude to the flood, a warning to Noah, but it's also saying, well, what do we do? Well, you bind these wicked souls after they've witnessed their own sons, these Nephilim, die. They see that they've all died. Then you're to bind them and throw them. One place it says into the ground in the desert. Another says into the valleys. These were the places where ancient people believed that you entered into the underworld. And of course, the desert was a symbolic place where nothing really grew. This would be a place of evil, so that would be an easy entry into the realm of the dead. So they were to be bound and placed and wait for the final judgment day. Well, let's look, got a few more here. Chapter 11, pretty brief. And in those days I will open the store chambers of blessings which are in heaven, and so as to send them down upon earth over the work and the labor of the children of men, and truth and peace shall be associated and together throughout all the days of the world and throughout all the generations of men. That was a brief chapter. Then chapter 12. Before these things Enoch was hidden, and no one of the children of men knew where he was hidden, and where he abode, and what had become of him. And his activities had to do with the watchers. And his days were with the holy ones. Now it's Enoch speaking. And I, Enoch, was blessing the Lord, the Majesty, the King of Kings, and lo, the watchers call me. Enoch the scribe and said to me, Enoch, thou scribe of righteousness, go declare to the watchers of the heavens, who have left the high heaven, the holy eternal place, have defiled themselves with women, and have done as the children of earth do, and have taken unto themselves wives. Ye have wrought great destruction on the earth, and ye shall have no peace, nor forgiveness of sin. And inasmuch as they delight themselves in their children, the murder of their beloved ones shall they see, and over the destruction of their children shall they lament, and shall make supplication unto eternity, but mercy and peace shall ye not attain. So he was to carry the word to the watchers that heaven had decreed that because of who they were, having been in the heavenlies and chosen to rebel in the way that they did and to do what they had done, that they could not look forward to the hope of forgiveness. Now, chapter 13. And Enoch went and said, Azazel, thou shalt have no peace. A severe sentence has gone forth against thee to put thee in bonds. And thou shalt not have toleration, nor request granted to thee because of the unrighteousness which thou hast taught. and because of all the works of the godlessness and unrighteousness and sin which thou hast shown to men. Then I went and spoke to them all together, and they were all afraid, and fear and trembling seized them. And they besought me to draw up a petition for them, that they might find forgiveness, and to read their petition in the presence of the Lord of heaven. For from thenceforward they could not speak with him, nor lift up their eyes to heaven, for shame of their sins, of which they had been condemned. Then I wrote out their petition, the prayer, in regard to their spirits and their flesh individually, and in regard to their request that they should have forgiveness and length. And I went off and sat down the waters of Dan, in the land of Dan, to the southwest of Hermon. So he's orienting himself towards Mount Hermon. I read their petition till I fell asleep, and behold, a dream came to me, and visions fell upon me, and I saw visions of chastisement. And a voice came bidding to tell to the sons of heaven and reprimand them. And when I awakened, I came into them, and they were all sitting, gathered together, weeping in Abel-Jael, which is between Lebanon and Sinesee, and their faces covered. And I recounted before them all the visions I had seen in my sleep, and I began to speak the words of righteousness and reprimand the heavenly watchers. Then chapter 14. The book of the words of righteousness and of the reprimand of the eternal watchers, in accordance with the command of the Holy Great One in that vision. I saw in my sleep what I will now say with a tongue of flesh and with the breath of my mouth, which the Great One has given to men to converse therein and understand with the heart. As he hath created and given to man the power of understanding the word of wisdom, so hath he created me also and given me the power of reprimanding the watchers, the children of heaven. Another way of saying the sons of God. I wrote out your petition, and in my vision it appeared thus, that your petition will not be granted unto you throughout all the days of eternity, and that judgment has been finally passed upon you, and yea, your petition will not be granted unto you. And from henceforth you shall not ascend into heaven unto all eternity, and in the bonds of the earth, the tree has gone forth, all the days of the world. And previously you shall have seen the destruction of your beloved sons, and you have no pleasure in them, for they shall fall before you by the sword. And your petition on their behalf shall not be granted, not yet on your own, even though you weep and pray and speak all the words contained in the writings which I have written. And the vision was shown to me thus, behold, in the vision clouds invited me, and a mist summoned me, and the course of the star at the lightning sped and hastened me, and the winds in the vision caused me to fly and lifted me upward and bore me into heaven. I went in till I drew nigh to a wall which is built of crystals and surrounded by tongues of fire. I remember that in the New Testament. And it began to frighten me. And I went into the tongues of fire and drew nigh to the large house which was built of crystals, and the walls of the house were like tessellated floor made of crystals, and its groundworks was of crystal. Its ceiling was like the path of stars and lightning, and between them were fiery cherubim, and their heavens was clear water. A flaming fire surrounded the wall, and its porticos blazed with fire. I entered into that house, and it was as hot as fire and as cold as ice. There was no delight of life therein. Fear covered me. Trembling got hold of me. And as I quaked and trembled, I fell upon my face, and I beheld a vision. And lo, there was a second house. So this is the holy place, now the Holy of Holies, greater than the former. And the entire portal stood open before me. It was built of flames of fire. In every respect, it is so excelled in splendor and magnificent extent, I cannot describe to you its splendor and extent. And its floor was of fire, and above it was lightning, and the path of the stars, the ceiling was also flaming fire. And I looked and saw thereupon a lofty throne. Its appearance was as crystal, and the wheels thereof as of the shining sun. And there was the vision of the cherubim. And from underneath the throne came streams of flaming fire, so that I could not look thereupon. And the great glory sat thereon, and his raiment shone down brightly, more brighter than the sun, and was whiter than any snow. None of the angels could enter and could behold his face by reason of his magnificence and glory, and no flesh could behold him. The flaming fire was round about him, and a great fire stood before him, and none around him could draw nigh to him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, yet he needed no counsel. And the most holy ones who were nigh to him did not leave by night nor depart from him. Until then I had been prostrate on my face, trembling, and the Lord called me in his own mouth and said to me, "Come hither, Enoch, and hear my word." And one of the holy ones came to me and walked me. He made me rise up and approach the door, and I bowed my face downward. So he's now at the council room of God, where there are thousands upon thousands of the spiritual beings, and one of the holy ones helps him to come to the door because God has something he wants to say to him. And that picks up in chapter 13. And he answered and said to me, "I hear his voice. Fear not, Enoch, thou righteous man, scribe of righteousness. Approach hither, hear my voice, and go say to the watchers of heaven, who have sent thee to intercede for them. You should intercede for men, and not men for you." So that was their role. "Wherefore have you left the high, holy, eternal heaven, and lain with women, and defiled yourself with daughters of men, and taken yourself wives, and done like the children of earth, and begotten giants as your sons? And though ye were holy, spiritual, living, and eternal, you have defiled yourselves with the blood of women, and have begotten children, and the blood of flesh, and as the children of men have lusted after flesh and blood, as those also do who die and perish. Therefore have I given them wives also, that they might impregnate them, and beget children by them, and thus nothing might be wanting to them on earth. But you went formerly spiritual, living eternal, immortal for all generations of the earth. And therefore I have not appointed wives for you. For as for the spiritual ones of heaven, in their dwelling, and now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth. Now remember that. The New Testament refers to evil spirits and demons interchangeably. And on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they were born from men and from the holy watchers. Is their beginning the primal origin? They shall be evil spirits on the earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. As for the spirits of heaven, in heaven shall be their dwelling. But as for the spirits of the earth, which are born upon the earth shall be their dwelling. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men, against women, because they have proceeded from them. So here, in effect, God is saying these Nephilim, these giants, the children of the sons of God and of women, when they die, they're not going to go where all the rest of human beings go. They're instead going to be left on the earth to wander hungry, and they're going to be a source of trouble upon the earth. So that's the source of evil spirits and demons, are the dead spirits of the Nephilim. And then we'll wrap it up in chapter 16. From the days of the slaughter and destruction and death of giants, when the souls of whose flesh the spirits, having gone forth, shall destroy without incurring judgment, thus shall they destroy until the day of consummation. the great judgment, in which the age shall be consummated. Over the watchers and the godless, yea, shall be wholly consummated. And now, as to the watchers who have sent thee to intercede for them, who had been afore in heaven, saying to them, you have been in heaven, but all the mysteries had not yet been revealed to you, and you knew worthless ones, and these, in the hardness of your hearts, you have made known to the women, and through their mysteries, women and men work much evil on the earth. Say to them, therefore, you have no peace. So, wanted to read at least that part in case somebody didn't have access to that. So it gives you a gist of what the book of Enoch says initially about these sons of God, now the watchers, their children who were giants, and their dead spirits, and now are the evil spirits that are upon the earth. So this is the explanation of those things that we find in the New Testament and some places in the Old Testament. But hopefully you found that interesting. There's a lot more, but there's way too much to cover in one session. We may refer later on to some other segments of Enoch, but this is the most pertinent to what we're talking about, which is Genesis 6, the rebellion in heaven, how it exacerbated evil on the earth as these sons of God taught men all kinds of secrets that unfortunately led to greed and violence and to the terrible corruption throughout the entire earth. So that's what I wanted to share about Enoch. Hopefully that was helpful. Let's close out with a word of prayer. Gracious Father, as we contemplate the behavior of the wicked, whether they be spiritual beings or they be earthly beings, we just pray, Father, that you'll remove from us our spirit of rebellion and give us instead a spirit of love and a spirit of faith and a spirit of hope that centers in you and your revealed Son, who is our Redeemer. We pray, Father, you will continue to give us wisdom that we might know how to live our lives and that we might better be able to understand your word and what it's saying to us. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for tuning in.